Canada and China have given a devastating shock to the United States, a shock that the U.S. would never be able to survive. Do you know that back in 2024, China imported crude oil from the United States worth $324 billion? Yes, that's for a single year. And what if China cut this oil imports by 90%? Interestingly, the United States itself imported crude oil from Canada, worth $103 billion in 2024. This meant that the U.S. was getting oil from Canada at a cheap price and selling it to global buyers like China, and making massive profits. For China, it was acceptable because it ensured a continuous supply of oil, no matter what happened. However, turning to Canada meant hurting relations with the United States, which were especially important due to trade. China exported products and services worth $438.95 billion to the United States the same year. But now, trade relations have been hit hard. Both China and Canada are angry. So what happens if they make a deal where Canada will be supplying crude oil directly to China, cutting the United States as the middleman? Well, precisely that has happened, and this is making Trump go insane. But how is China doing it? And how can it help Canada build an independent oil exporting infrastructure that can deprive the U.S. of hefty profits? In this video, let's know about the whole story. A seismic shift is underway in global energy, and the U.S. is pretending it's not happening. Over the past 2 years, China has cut its oil imports from the United States by a jaw-dropping 90%, turning instead to a new strategic partner, Canada. Behind this quiet but revolutionary realignment lies not just trade policy or market fluctuations, but a collapse of trust in American leadership, triggered almost entirely by Donald Trump's reckless trade war. Back in 2022, China was buying nearly 500,000 barrels per day of American oil. Today, that number has collapsed to just 45,000. It's not because China doesn't need oil. It's quite the opposite. The world's largest energy consumer is simply done tolerating a supplier that treats trade as blackmail. Trump's America First tariffs, the Defense Authorization Act's port bans, and Washington's constant attempts to weaponize commerce have turned U.S. oil into a geopolitical liability. Beijing took the hint, and while the U.S. imposed restrictions, Canada was building capacity. That's where the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion becomes relevant. It's a $21.4 billion masterstroke of engineering that gave Canada the infrastructure to finally escape U.S. bottlenecks. With 590,000 new barrels per day flowing west from Alberta to the Pacific, Canada suddenly had an open corridor to Asia, and China wasted no time. By March 2025, Chinese imports of Canadian oil surged to 850,000 barrels per day, surpassing even longtime suppliers like Saudi Arabia. What began as a hedge is now a fully fledged energy alliance, with Canada's share of China's oil imports soaring from just 2.3% in 2022 to nearly 12% by 2025. And this is a structural shift. PetroChina, China's largest oil company, signed a 10-year deal with Canadian Natural Resources to purchase 100,000 barrels per day. Other Chinese refiners followed. Alberta's heavy crude is uniquely suited to China's refinery infrastructure, especially in Shandong Province, where dual-reactor catalytic cracking is optimized for dense, sulfur-rich feedstock. Unlike America's light shale oil, which requires costly adjustment and yields less diesel per barrel, Canadian crude runs cleaner, smoother, and cheaper, saving refiners up to $6 per barrel in processing. But the deeper story is trust. Canada doesn't threaten to cut supply when political tensions rise. It doesn't impose sudden sanctions or tie oil exports to ideological tests. And crucially, it doesn't provoke wars over Taiwan. From Beijing's perspective, Canada is everything the U.S. used to be: stable, pragmatic, and respectful of sovereignty. That's why China has committed 18 million barrels of its strategic reserve to Canadian crude, built blockchain-backed verification for quality control, and signed fast-track letters of credit with Canadian banks to eliminate delays. This isn't a diversification strategy anymore. It's a geopolitical partnership. Meanwhile, America's oil producers are sitting on mountains of unsold inventory. Gulf Coast crude stockpiles have exploded to 320 million barrels, the highest in 8 years, with nowhere to go. What used to be guaranteed demand from the world's top importer has vanished. And Washington? It's in full denial mode. The Treasury is quietly absorbing the fallout, losing an estimated $20 billion in oil revenue annually, while Trump continues to parade around claiming he beat China. The irony is that it's American taxpayers who will cover the losses through higher debt, weakened infrastructure, and slashed public programs. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. Beyond the US and Canada, the global oil map is being redrawn. Mexican oil giant Pemex has diverted 150,000 barrels a day to Europe after being pushed out of Asia. OPEC Plus now grants Canada exemptions, acknowledging the reality that its production can't be squeezed under old rules. Middle Eastern producers are watching their price power erode as Canadian supply grows in influence. And perhaps most importantly, Canada's Western Canadian Select crude is now listed on the Shanghai Futures Exchange, a milestone that gives Canada pricing leverage in Asia for the first time in history. Even shipping patterns have been rewritten. TMX allows Canadian oil to reach China's Ningbo port in just 23 days, 2 weeks faster than oil shipped from the U.S. Gulf Coast, which must detour through the increasingly choked Panama Canal. The cost savings, reliability, and speed all favor Canada. And the message to the rest of the world is loud and clear. Energy partnerships built on stability, not aggression, will define the next decade. So while Trump rants about tariffs and claims victory from a collapsing trade balance, China and Canada are building something far more powerful. A quiet, steady alliance that bypasses American arrogance entirely. And unlike Washington's erratic diplomacy, it's built to last. Here is something more interesting. China is helping Canada build an independent energy exporting infrastructure, introducing it into the global market beyond the United States. Canada's oil sands, long seen as dependent on a single, demanding customer, are now entering a new era. What was once a lopsided trade where Canadian crude flowed south to American refineries with little leverage has now evolved into a global supply relationship with Asia. Producers like Suncor, Cenovus, and CNRL have responded with ambition. They are pouring capital into refining upgrades, sustainability initiatives, and extraction technologies that make their oil cleaner, cheaper, and more tailored to what Asia demands. And one country is driving this momentum with surgical precision: China. It's a strategic redesign of global energy flows. China isn't just buying Canadian oil. It's actively helping build an entire oil export ecosystem that bypasses the United States altogether. And it's not generosity, it's foresight. China, as the world's largest energy consumer, understands what volatility looks like. It watched Trump weaponize ports, slap tariffs on strategic goods, and treat oil diplomacy like a game of poker. And now it's doing something the US never expected: building Canada up as a rival energy axis, one that doesn't need US pipelines, approvals, or politics to reach Asia. Through strategic infrastructure investment, China has helped fast-track expansions like the Westridge Marine Terminal in British Columbia, a critical node allowing Canadian oil to flow to the Pacific without waiting in line behind American exports. This is paired with billions poured into refining adjustments. Chinese engineers have created 17 new catalyst formulas specifically designed for Canada's heavy oil blends, proof not just of interest, but of integration. But this alliance runs deeper than tankers and catalysts. On the financial front, China helped push Western Canadian Select crude blend onto the Shanghai Futures Exchange, breaking the grip of U.S. benchmark pricing. Now, Canadian oil has its own place in the global pricing system, no longer pegged to American whims. And while Canada builds, the U.S. watches. Because here is the reality. America didn't lose this energy partnership to China. It gave it away. When Trump turned energy into a battlefield and treated diplomacy like a Twitter war, he created the very conditions for this realignment. He scared away the world's biggest oil customer and handed them straight to Ottawa. For decades, Washington viewed Canadian oil as its backyard property with no competition, no alternatives. Trump shattered that illusion. Yes, Canada is still part of NATO. Yes, it's a Western democracy. But in energy trade, China is helping Canada carve a new identity, one that doesn't orbit around U.S. approval. China is helping build the pipelines, the terminals, the futures market, and the buyer relationships. Canada is no longer just shipping oil. It's shipping leverage. With Beijing as its partner. And Trump? He promised energy dominance. But all he delivered was chaos. His tariffs didn't protect American jobs. His bluster didn't earn Chinese respect. What he created was a vacuum, and China filled it. Today, the United States sits on overflowing Gulf Coast inventories with nowhere to send them, while Canadian producers enjoy long-term contracts, better netbacks, and record shipments to Asia. The irony is painful. Trump's aggressive posturing didn't isolate China. It isolated America. He claimed he would win the trade war. Instead, he helped Canada win the oil war. And Beijing played its cards like a master strategist, quietly empowering a friendly neighbor to build independence and rewire trade away from Washington. This isn't just an oil pivot. It's a textbook example of what happens when ego replaces strategy. While Trump was ranting at rallies, China was redrawing the map. And Canada, often underestimated, capitalized brilliantly. Now the question isn't whether Canada can sustain this. It's whether the U.S. even understands what it lost. What do you think? Will Trump try to sabotage Canada's building of an independent oil exporting mechanism, bypassing the United States? Isn't it true that Canada wants to sell oil? And China is the biggest energy importer. So they both can use this to punish the United States. In the comment section below, share your thoughts on what if the United States is neutralized and deprived of its oil power? How will it impact the dollar given that the petrodollar system runs the world? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.